Rather, the President has requested that the Minister provide him with a detailed report on the decorum and substance of her engagement with Parliament. In this regard, the President will also appreciate a report on the process undertaken to appoint the board members to the SETA, the Sector Education and Training Authorities, that were at the center of the Portfolio Committee's question. The request for the report is in view of the President's expectation that ministers, deputy ministers, and senior executives in the public sector conduct themselves professionally, transparently, and cordially in engaging with Parliament and other accountability structures. The public broadcast of parliamentary proceedings and the viral spread of content from and public comment on these proceedings demand that all ministers and senior officials remain conscious of all aspects of their conduct during such proceedings. It also demands that the Portfolio Committee meetings are viewed as a welcome platform on which to update the nation on the progress the government is making in all of its portfolios. The President expects the Minister to establish a constructive relationship with the Portfolio Committee as she exercises her leadership and accountability. And just quickly on the program, starting tomorrow on the 6th of June, President Ramaphosa will tomorrow host a meeting with the Chief Justice of the Republic of South Africa, Justice Mandisa, and members of the judiciary at his official residence, Mahlambandlovu in Pretoria. The meeting will discuss operations of the superior courts and other challenges faced by the judiciary. The President will be supported by the Ministers of Justice and Constitutional Development, Minister of Finance, as well as Public Service and Administration. We will release a statement at the end of the meeting, and Minister Kupai has undertaken to field a lot of the interviews on the issues that will be discussed in the meeting. So you'll hear from my colleague Terence in that regard. On the same day, later on in the day, the 6th of June, the President will address the annual Black Business Council Summit Gala and Awards Dinner at the Radisson Hotel and Convention Center in the city of Ekurhuleni. The Black Business Council is hosting the 2025 Annual Summit under the theme Socio-Economic Transformation and Inclusive Growth in the context of the Government of National Unity, the G20 presidency, and the changing geopolitical dynamics. Over the course of the summit, ministers will participate in panel discussions ranging from the theme of the summit to access to funding for Black-owned, women-owned, and youth-owned businesses, which will also encompass a panel on strategies to revive and grow the economy. The BBC represents Black professionals, business associations, and chambers, and it advocates for the interest of Black business and works to ensure that policies and economic frameworks reflect the inclusive growth agenda. On the 10th of June, as South Africa commemorates Youth Month under the theme Skills for the Changing World, Empowering Youth for Meaningful Economic Participation, the President will, as part of Youth Month activities, engage with youth beneficiaries of the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention, PYEI, and the Presidential Employment Stimulus, the PES, flagship programs here in Pretoria. The President will visit 3 sites, which are at the Sefako Mahato Primary School in Salisville, the South African Creative Industries Incubator in Eersterus, and the Foundation for the Professional Development in Pretoria East. These visits will highlight innovative implementation models and public-private partnerships that are delivering dignified, high-quality employment and skilling outcomes for youth at scale. The President will, during the visits, interact directly with youth beneficiaries, educators, and other implementing partners, and he will see firsthand how these programs, in their community-based nature, demand-led approach, are reshaping labor market access for the country's most excluded youth. Just a note for the editors, the visit to the school will be open to the media to cover the engagement between the President and the teacher assistants. However, due to space limitations and other factors where you have young learners, there will be a restriction in terms of access to classrooms. The GCIS will assist in capturing those images and sharing that material. On the 12th of June, the President will address the inaugural Africa Green Hydrogen Summit, scheduled to take place from the 12th to the 13th of June in Cape Town under the leadership of the Department of Electricity and Energy. This high-level platform builds on the momentum of the successful South African Green Hydrogen Summits of 2022 and 2023 and reflects a natural evolution towards a continent-wide agenda. It seeks to promote regional collaboration, advance technological exchange, and unlock market access for African countries in the emerging green hydrogen economy. The Africa Green Hydrogen Summit 2025 arrives at a pivotal moment for the continent's clean energy transition. Africa's vast renewable energy potential, coupled with its mineral endowments, positions it to become a competitive global supplier of green hydrogen and its derivatives. Excuse me. Then, between the 14th and the 17th of June, President Ramaphosa will travel to Canada, Kananaskis, to attend and participate in the G7 Leaders Summit. The theme and purpose of the G7 Leaders discussion is to, I quote, explore leadership and collaboration in driving a comprehensive approach to energy security with a focus on technology and innovation, diversification, and strengthening critical mineral supply chains and infrastructure and investment. The President will use his participation at the summit to engage fellow world leaders towards finding solutions for energy security and related issues linked to South Africa's G20 presidency. This will provide the President with an opportunity to strengthen the relationship and cooperation between the G7 and the G20. On the 19th of June, the President will respond to questions for oral reply by members of the National Council of Provinces and Parliament. The President's engagement with the NCOP is a mechanism for Parliament to hold the executive branch of government accountable, to ensure transparency, and to strengthen constitutional democracy. Moving on to the 20th of June, the judiciary will host a celebration to mark the 30th anniversary of the Constitutional Court of the Republic of South Africa. This celebration reflects on the court's pivotal role in shaping our constitutional democracy, safeguarding human rights, and upholding the rule of law. The Constitutional Court of South Africa remains the apex court on all constitutional matters, ensuring the proper interpretation, protection, and enforcement of our Constitution. The President is deeply honored to attend this event and participate in the occasion and will deliver the keynote address. On the same day, the President will also present South Africa's reflections on the role of religion and church in addressing domestic and global issues at the World Council of Churches Summit in Johannesburg. The World Council of Churches constitutes of 352 member churches with over 600 million Christians from 120 million countries in the world. The Council works with non-governmental organizations, interreligious leaders, and others to seek justice, peace, reconciliation, and unity in the world. The WCC played a very significant role in campaigning against apartheid in the international community. Its program on combating racism provided an international platform to work against the evils of racism and apartheid in South Africa. The WCC efforts to put the issues of South Africa at that time on the international stage were quite successful and led to the withdrawal of the Dutch Reformed Church from the WCC. They are now full members, obviously, of the WCC post our country's transition in 1994. On the 27th of June, the President will travel to Windhoek, Namibia, at the invitation of Her Excellency President Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah, in a capacity as the chairperson of SACU, that is the Southern African Customs Union, which will be meeting at its 9th summit of heads of state and government on the 27th of June, as stated. The summit will receive an update from the SACU Council of Ministers on the implementation of the SACU Strategic Plan 2022 to 2027 and the progress made on the process of a reimagined SACU as adopted by the SACU heads of state and government. The summit will also provide an opportunity to engage on geopolitical developments affecting the region. South Africa will assume the SACU chairship from July 2025. Almost towards the end. On the 30th of June, at the invitation of President Pedro Sanchez of the government of Spain and the United Nations Secretary General, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, President Ramaphosa will lead South Africa's participating delegation to the 4th International Conference on the Financing for Development Summit that will be taking place in Seville, Spain on the 30th of June. This conference aims to address new and emerging issues in financing for development, including the need to fully implement the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, and to reform the international financial architecture. South Africa's participation at the summit aligns with its G20 presidency objectives of solidarity, equality, and sustainability in contemplating or complementing rather and supporting the summit goals of reshaping the global financial system in support of the Sustainable Development Goals. On the margins of the 4th Financing for Development Summit, South Africa will also convene a side event under the theme Forging a Common Agenda to achieve debt sustainability in developing economies. South Africa seeks to advance through cooperation, collaboration, and partnership sustainable solutions to tackle high structural deficits and liquidity challenges and extend debt relief to developing economies which disproportionately affect countries in our continent. This event will bring together leading voices from various debt-related initiatives to identify synergies and areas of convergence. It will also seek consensus and highlight solutions that enjoy broad support. So that's the program, colleagues. I'm happy to take questions. Just before I do so, I see Kanita already has a hand up. So before Kanita you come in, let me just cover this part on news that we've just received and that the President has just received. President Ramaphosa has learned with sadness of the passing of former President of Zambia, President Edgar Lungu. President Edgar Lungu was 68 years of age. The President offers his condolences to President Lungu's family, friends, and the people of Zambia. President Lungu has been receiving medical care here in South Africa for an extended period. Government, the Lungu family and the Zambian High Commission will undertake the necessary processes to give effect to the wishes of the Lungu family. May President Lungu's soul rest in peace. Okay. Kanita, since you had your hand up, we'll start with you.
Thank you very much, Vincent. And you answered my questions about former President Lungu. Thank you very much for that.
Sure.
Just taking you back to the first point you made about the Minister of Higher Education, by when will the Minister finish a report to the President? And what sort of details is the President looking for, given the fact that it was a televised interaction? What more is the President looking for from the Minister? And secondly, is there any way that you can update us on discussions with Washington, particularly about the trade deal? We know that there was, from the trip that the President undertook in the delegation, there was an effort to wait for the U.S. trade representatives to come back on whether they would accept the offer, etc., particularly in light of the 9th of July deadline for the 90-day window of tariffs. Is there any update in relation to the talks that were initiated when the President was in Washington, and is there anything that you can update the nation in that regard? Thank you.
Okay. Kanita, I think we should take comfort, that the President is attending to the matter concerning Minister Nkabane's meeting with the Portfolio Committee and the related issues. When it comes to deadlines and the substance of reports, it's often better to just leave it between the President and the Minister concerned. Otherwise, we're running the risk of the President managing issues with members of his national executive in the public domain, which is not ideal and will not be prudent. But I think it is important to note that it's an issue that has been quite topical, and it's an issue that has not escaped the President's attention, and he has since attended to the matter and will be engaging the Minister over that report and other related issues. And I think it's best that we'll leave it at that before we become too invasive on the details between him and the Minister in this regard. And I say that with all due respect, appreciating the level of transparency that as a government we are committed to, but on the other hand, we should also allow the President a little bit of room to address the matter with the Minister. With respect to the update on trade-related issues with the U.S., I guess the first point to make is that a lot of people based their analysis of that meeting on what they saw on their TV screens in the Oval Office. And the real meat of the meeting was what transpired in a closed session. And the President is enthused and satisfied with the opportunity that he had to be in discussion with President Trump. The President feels that we are at a much better position post that visit than we were prior to the visit. And certainly it has opened the door for more engagements between our respective trade teams. What has happened so far is that the DTIC team, as led by the Minister and Ambassador Xolelo Melumbi Peters, has presented a proposal before the USTR, and they are waiting a detailed response to that package proposal. And meetings are planned for later on in the month, where there will be more formal and substantive engagements on what I will call the new trade relationship framework with the US, being mindful obviously that you have that 90-day deadline that you've referenced. part of the issues that will be discussed will be issues of tariffs, alongside what we see as an excellent opportunity to expand the basket of tradable goods between ourselves and the United States. Whether you have a continuation with respect to the AGOA trade scheme or not, the President and the rest of his administration are optimistic that in the end we will have what will be a mutually beneficial trade relationship with the United States. So in short, Kanita, I don't have the details to give you, except to say we're in a much better position now to engage over those issues, and engagements will be taking place by mid to late June, and we will allow that process to run its course, and we are optimistic that will result into a mutually beneficial trade relationship with the U.S. The President had indicated prior to going to Washington that he would like to see the AGOA scheme continue, and also to see South Africa's continued participation within AGOA. However, we're ready to discuss a new trade relationship framework in the absence of that continuation, or in the absence of South Africa's continued participation. And so we feel highly optimistic and quite satisfied that once that process ensues formally, it will result into something better for our economy as well as for the U.S. economy in that regard. Vital? Here's a mic, Vital, so that...
The Charlie Mark Shift News Agency. The question about the forthcoming BRICS summit in Rio de Janeiro. If President Ramaphosa is planning to go to Brazil, the summit will take 6 to 7 of July, and how important the current situation, political, economic, the South African participation in BRICS. Thank you.
Vital, the President will be traveling to Brazil. We were planning to make that announcement much later in the month, but yes, the President will be traveling to Brazil to attend the BRICS Summit Head of State and Government. And indeed, it is an important platform, as well as important grouping of countries in that aspect. You will imagine there will be a number of key and very important issues, both from a geopolitical point of view, but also from our own domestic interest in terms of the discussions and the overall agenda of the BRICS Summit. But we will release that information in more detail at a later stage.
959. Just on the international front, has there been any engagement from the President's side with his counterparts in Ukraine or Russia, just considering that tensions continue to be heightening there with some of Putin's recent statements? Thanks.
Karenda, not recently. The last engagements that took place, obviously with President Zelensky when he was here, around that time, shortly before he arrived here, the President had spoken to President Putin over the phone. Obviously, since then, there's been an escalation in the fighting. President Ramaphosa remains concerned at that escalation in the fighting as it elongates the suffering and the loss of human life, as well as the destruction to infrastructure. And the President remains firm of the view that there is no other way of resolving that conflict except for both warring parties to sit around the table and engage. And the President feels that with tensions escalating, it's time for leadership of both countries to step in now and ensure that there is a framework that is created towards a path to peace, and that talks, resume with immediate effect, considering the scale of the damage that that is currently taking place in both countries.
Thank you, Alex Sheff from International Affairs Journal. Is President planning to visit St. Petersburg International Economic Forum that will host in later this month? Thank you.
Richard, as you heard when I was going through the program, later this month, the President has committed himself to attending that Financing for Development Summit in Seville, Spain, which will be preceded by a state visit in Spain. So unfortunately, due to that scheduled clash, he will not be able to travel to St. Petersburg.
Kamarolo Michala from IOL. No, I just needed an update on the renaming of Santon Drive to Leila Khaled. You have been in talks with the City of Johannesburg about that, but then they still, today the mayor confirmed that no, they still stand by the stance to say no, Santon Drive should be renamed to Leila Khaled. So I just needed an update on that. And also, the NPA has been criticized and accused of being incompetent. Obviously, this follows the cases that they have lost. So are you not somehow concerned about the NPA's performance in obviously them losing almost all the high-profile cases? Yeah, just your comment on that. Thank you.
I haven't seen the comments that you attribute to the mayor, so I'm a little bit handicapped in that regard because I haven't seen those comments. What I will tell you though is that there was a commitment from the mayor and the City of Joburg to conclude the process around the renaming of the street. We obviously, as a government, considering the sort of diplomatic tensions that were quite elevated prior to the President's visit to Washington, had expressed our concern about what is envisaged as the outcome of that process, with a particular name that seems to have enjoyed some support in the Council. And there was an assurance that that process will be handled with a great deal of care, recognizing the diplomatic sensitivities that we have to navigate. One will hope that that consideration remains in place and that without interfering with the process, so to speak, there will be an appreciation on those who are tasked with running the process and making the decision of the sort of sensitivities and the kind of issues that the President and the Minister of International Relations are trying to manage on the diplomatic front. I'm not going to comment on issues related to the NPA and the criticism that you cite, because those are legal matters. Some of them are still in court, and court processes are underway. So it's not for us as the presidency, nor for the President at this stage to enter into that ring. It will not be appropriate because those matters are still before court, some of them. So let's leave that one at that, to you and those who observe those issues. There's a question over there from the SABC.
Yes, Michael from the
Michael,
SABC,
yes,
yeah,
Michael.
Channel Africa. Mr. Magwenya, I just wanted to find out, there was a visit that supposed to be undertaken by the Zambian President Hichilema, I think so. You announced it prior to the briefing that we had prior to President Zelensky's visit. Second question is, how far is the case with Israel? We see the atrocities continuing, and we haven't seen, since South Africa took the case to the court, International Court, Criminal Court of Justice, we haven't seen any South African comment on the latest, the current situation in Gaza, as far as the humanitarian situation is concerned. And then what is South Africa's current position on that situation? And then on the TLC cases, many of those who are fingered or committed the atrocities are deceased. How will South Africa be able to hold those that were involved accountable, since the president announced that those cases should be reinstated? Thank you so much.
So, Michael, what's your exact question about the visit of the president of Zambia? That it did not happen?
Yeah, just wanted to.
Oh, okay. No, that was that was just a scheduling issue. I'm sure both offices, through the appropriate diplomatic channels, will reset the dates. So there's no problem in that regard. Look, our position as a country and that of the president and the government remains the same with respect to what we see happening in Gaza. There is a continued disregard of international law, as well as humanitarian law for that matter. So we continue to note all of these events and atrocities that are occurring there with a great deal of concern with respect to loss of life, with respect to people dying while they're trying to access critical supplies for their livelihoods, whether it be food or medical supplies. And we will continue to condemn the disproportionate use of force that has been employed by the Israeli government in this regard. The matter is before the court, and so that process is underway. If I'm not mistaken, Israel, they're finalizing their response to our papers, if you like, that we presented to the court, and the evidence that we submitted. It's going to take some time to reach conclusion. It has a number of milestones along the way, but yeah, the situation remains of huge concern. What is encouraging is that we're seeing more and more voices from the international community recognizing that what is happening in Gaza is a grave injustice, and it's a flagrant disregard of international law, and that genocide may really be committed there. And we've heard even from former officials of the Biden administration asserting that war crimes may have been committed. And so we remain concerned. With that encouragement of more voices from the international community coming out, we will call for more voices to put pressure on the Israeli government to do the right thing, to follow the provisional measures that the court has handed over the last year, and to recommit itself to the auspices of international law and human rights principles. With respect to TRC cases, well, let's let the commission start its work, and let's see. I don't think we can preempt or prejudge the outcome in any manner just simply because there is knowledge that some of the alleged perpetrators may no longer be alive. Part of the reason for the commission is to get to the bottom of the main issues, right, around the delays, what were the reasons behind the delays, and so forth. And so we will be guided by the outcome of the commission's work as to how we proceed in terms of the way forward. But I think it's too early at this stage to preempt or prejudge what may be the outcome, just simply because there is a consideration that some of the alleged belligerents may no longer be alive. Khotatso?
Thank you very much, Khotatso Marisa from the Sunday Times. I think just to piggyback on the ICJ question, what does the president make of Mr. Donald Trump's reaction to the question about the ICJ case. Previously, I mean, we were under the impression that the ICJ case is at the center of the diplomatic tensions between South Africa and the United States. But he seemed to have suggested that, you know what, let the case go ahead and reach its conclusion. What is the President's view on that?
Kgothatso, the President finds it logical that anybody who has an understanding of those kinds of ICJ processes will affirm the view that those processes must be allowed to run their course and reach the logical conclusion. There could have been no other way in that regard. We had heard murmurs and noises around the fact that there may be an expectation that we consider withdrawing that case. That was never going to be, both from a principal point of view, but also from a point of view of the actual court processes that are underway. So the President found it logical that President Trump has centered himself in that position because there's nothing else that can be done. The President is supportive of President Trump's intentions to end that conflict. The President would like to see the United States leveraging its authority a lot more to lean on Israel to address a lot of issues that are of concern with the manner in which that conflict is playing out. And yeah, to your question, it's really a logical sort of point for President Trump to kind of adopt because there was no other alternative in terms of dealing with the matter. Oh yes, Patience, the virtual questions, yes. So maybe the similar ones, Patience, you can just kind of club together if, but yeah.
Zintle from Bloomberg. One of the questions you've covered regarding the US-SA trade relations. The second question is regarding President Ramaphosa's attendance at the G7 Leaders Summit in Kananaskis. The question is, does President plan to have a meeting with President Trump? And that's also the same question coming from Sophie from SABC. The second question is from Natasha. You've covered part of it. The NPA has come under fire after the court declared Ms. Cholota's extradition as unlawful. Just your reaction from the presidency on this. What does that say about the public perception of the NPA? Is the NPA failing the people of South Africa? That was Natasha. Eyewitness News from Lindsay. She says, how does the presidency view level 2 travel alert for South Africa on his alert? I'll stop there for now and then we can take a few more.
Okay. Is there a plan to meet with President Trump? At this stage, both teams in the presidency and DECO are working on a schedule for bilateral meetings. And so it's still early to say which meetings the President will have and will not be able to have in that regard. As we get closer to the G7 summit, hopefully we'll be able to share the President's schedule with respect to bilateral meetings. Suffice to say, the meeting at the White House is quite recent and it was quite comprehensive. I'll imagine there's no real pressure for the President to push for that meeting because that's a recent meeting. What will be important will be for President Ramaphosa to give himself time to meet other G7 leaders and sort of align the G7 with our G20 theme during the course of South Africa's presidency of the G20. Natasha, I'll imagine, I may be wrong here. I haven't seen the statement from the NPA. I'll imagine the NPA might appeal that judgment. So it's still very early to say anything or reach conclusions in this regard. I'm really reluctant to engage over matters that are before court. So it's still early days with respect to that process. Of course, people will have views about the outcomes of cases and so on against what is expected to be the outcome. But I think one, in this case, should be guided by the processes themselves as they continue to unfold. The travel alert, what we notice with that travel alert, our understanding, there's always been some kind of standard travel alert that the US issues to its citizens on a number of countries. With respect to South Africa, the travel alert just lists, the kind of crimes that most South Africans, if not all South Africans, fall victim to, or crimes that confront us as a country. There's nothing new there in that regard. I guess, what do we make of the discussion in the Oval Office? Look, the issue before the president got to the Oval Office was the false claim that there is a so-called persecution of people of a particular race in South Africa, which was not true. That narrative, as you have observed, is dying a very slow natural death in that regard, because it cannot be substantiated. And we've always said that narrative cannot be sustained in the absence of anything substantial that is placed on the table. And so we looked at that alert as one of those sort of standard alerts, and there's a whole number of other countries on the continent who've had alerts issued. What is interesting, though, which Lindsay should look at with Tourism South Africa, is the number of American tourists that visit South Africa. That number seems to be growing. There's an establishment that I get accommodated in whenever I'm in Cape Town for work, without fail. Every time I'm in that establishment, there are American tourists in that establishment. This is just my anecdotal experience. But Tourism South Africa will have better numbers in that regard. I think I saw a number somewhere to the tune of about 400,000 visitors, but I'm not certain of the period. It was actually included in the President's newsletter on our relationship with the US. So I'll urge colleagues to look at that, and that speaks for itself. And so travel alerts are travel alerts. Governments feel compelled to issue those, but the reality is that those people who want to visit South Africa and enjoy its beauty and splendor, they do so, and they do so by taking enough precaution that we all take as citizens in this country, and precaution that we take even when we visit other parts of the world. So there's nothing to be overly concerned about that alleged issue.
So I have a question from Netwerk 24, which is Gert. When will the President's special envoy to the US be deployed and officially start doing some work in the US? That's the first question. I have a question from Ed from BBC. Can the Presidency confirm if a second flight left SA last week under the US Afrikaner Refugee Program? And if so, how many people are on the flight under the scheme, and how many more do you expect to leave under this scheme?
No, I think the question is misdirected. The presidency or the South African government is not running any scheme. And we're on record saying there are no South African citizens that can be described as refugees under the true international law definition of what constitutes a refugee. So we've held the position that this constitutes an abuse of the term. There are areas of the world where that term can be applied, and deservedly so, not in the case of South Africa. So that's number one. We need to just dispel with that. And it's not for us to talk about the scheme and how many people that are in that scheme. What is important is that at some point, logic will dictate that either the recruitment of whites only out of South Africa who may or may not have agricultural skills serves a particular purpose in the United States, and we'll leave that for the authorities in the US to articulate. It's not for us to articulate. But logic will dictate that at some point, that whole arrangement must be given its proper and honest description or name, in terms of, we are aware that there was a commercial flight that left with some people, albeit as much more smaller number than the previous group. That information we have, obviously. It's par for course that as a government we will have that information. But, you know, we're still a little bit, shall I say, a bit scornful of that program, because it's not part of any reality. And we hope that there will be some logic that is applied around it. If there's a recruitment of people of a particular race with certain skills, then it must be called as that, but it mustn't be disguised as other things, because there's no South African citizen that is a refugee, whether in this country or in any other part of the world. Is that it? Hotato wants to knock off, so
No.
are there more questions?
Yes, WC
Okay.
Jonas.
Oh, yes. No, you know, the work of the envoy does not involve being locked down in that particular country for extended periods of time. Mr. Jonas can do his US-related work from any location in the world, and so we don't have hard timelines about when is he going to do what. He's engaged with the process, and he is on speed dial with the president with respect to matters related to the US. But it's, you know, his travels are unlike that of a minister or a president that we're going to announce through a media advisory. He's getting on with what he needs to do wherever he is, and he's coordinating his engagements with DECO as well as with the DTIC, as we mentioned in our announcement when he was appointed.
Still have a few.
A few. Hotato wants to go home, but there's one here. So maybe let's take one here, and then we'll go back to those online.
Good evening. My name is Malatalo Knowledge Sirumula from UNISA Radio. So I wanted to ask, with the recent crime statistics, whereby in Gauteng we see the kidnapping rate going high and then the murder rate going low, what is the President's immediate response to the alarming increase in the kidnappings in Gauteng? And are there any national interventions being considered or implemented to support the provincial government and South African Police Service in addressing the kidnappings?
Let me respond to you in very generic terms. And in terms of specifics, my colleague, who's very brilliant in communicating, Brigadier Atlanta Mate, will give you the specific. She's a policewoman, so I can't interfere in her work. What the president often says and tells people, even world leaders, and he related this to President Trump, is that where we see high concentration levels of certain crimes, we have recent experience of some success where we deploy task teams that are dedicated to dealing with those crimes. You will have noticed that with respect to cash in transit, for example, cash in transit robberies, rather, the moment there was a dedicated task team to deal with CIT robberies, there was a drop in those incidents, and you've seen the rapid nature in which police are able to respond to those incidents. And so I would imagine that if not already, at some point, the leadership of SABC will look at that model and see how they resolve it. I mean, they've been able, in some cases, to apprehend the perpetrators and assist those people who have been kidnapped. So it is a matter of concern, obviously, but it's a matter that the president is assured is receiving the highest level of attention within SAP's leadership. I just don't have the exact details at this stage. That's why I'm referring you to Brigadier Mate. But I'm just referencing what has proven to work, which the president always cites, even with respect to illegal mining. You know, you immediately saw a change once there was a dedicated task team in dealing with those illegal mining activities. So I'll imagine that there is a process already underway, if not already in place, to look at the kidnappings from that point of view, where you will have dedicated resources dealing with that crime. Should we go back to your virtual questions?
Yeah, just two more. Another one from Mayeni Jones from BBC. You've covered most of it, but then there was a question on, since presidency says they've had a good meeting with the US, was there any agreement or any discussion on rolling back on tariffs against South Africa? Second question, does South Africa have any confirmation of President Trump's attendance at the G20 summit? That's the last one.
Right. So earlier on I said part of the discussion between the two respective trade negotiating teams will be the issue of tariffs. So when you're looking at either revised or new relationship trade framework, one of the key elements of that relationship or trade relationship will be to look at the tariff regime that must be balanced and in the context of working towards a mutually beneficial trade relationship, both sides will look at the issue of tariffs in a manner that will enable that sort of positive, or rather envisage positive trade between the two countries. So the issue of tariffs will be part of the basket of issues that the teams will engage over as they go through the trade package proposal that South Africa has prepared. Do we have agreement from President Trump that he will attend the G20? President Ramaphosa affirmed the invitation, that the invitation still remains. President Trump was not openly and outrightly opposed to that invitation. There's still a bit of time between now and November, and we remain hopeful that President Trump will attend. The president made a very strong and powerful point to President Trump in the Oval Office, that the United States was at the forefront of creating the G20. It will be very important for President Trump to be present when President Ramaphosa hands over the presidency of the G20 to the United States, in recognizing that historical context of the beginnings of the G20, which is a point that President Trump acknowledged and recognized. And so we're very hopeful. We're far more hopeful now than we were before the visit to the White House that he will attend, and hopefully we'll be able to throw in a round of golf there. I mean, we have amazing golf courses that President Trump will be spoiled for choice in terms of choosing. So we look forward to that. We can now release Khotato to go home, because and Vital is also in a hurry. So colleagues, I guess we're all happy. Kanita, you happy? Okay, great. Thank you so much, colleagues. Have a good evening. Cheers.